All right, let's kick things off. Thanks everybody for joining us for another edition of Halborn Office Hours. I'm excited to be joined today by Charlie from ZetaChain. Charlie, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you just give us a bit about yourself and your
Yeah,
background?
absolutely. So I'm Charlie McCowan. I lead the security and DevOps efforts at ZetaChain, based out in Denver, Colorado, and I've been in the security industry for about 10 years. I was on cloud security and security automation before moving into the Web3 world a couple of years ago.
And how do you find that transition? Happy you did it?
Yes, absolutely. It's exciting, right? I think cloud security was a little bit exciting, but Web3, there's always something going on, right? Whether it be new cutting edge techniques, major hacks going on, there's always something, as well as just the type of products we build are pretty fascinating.
It's funny. It's the things that get us excited as security professionals are the stuff that we're trying to protect against. So it's an interesting dichotomy there.
Yes,
Can
absolutely.
you can you just give us a little bit about ZetaChain? Talk about the team behind it and your mission.
Yep. So yeah, ZetaChain, we're kind of a blockchain built for omni-chain connectivity. And what that really means is, we'll dive into some more of the specifics, I think, in a bit, but we're built from the ground up to kind of help make this multi-chain world a little bit easier, right? Make it a little easier to develop applications that work across multiple chains. And we've been working on it for a couple of years and really getting ready to launch it out in the world soon. The team is about 27-ish people across 8 different countries. We've got kind of members and founders who've been in the crypto space since 2013. So really just a really great group of people working on this.
That's amazing. So you mentioned omni-chain. So for our listeners, can you just walk through what is the concept of an omni-chain and how does that actually differentiate maybe from a bridge, for example?
Yes. So I think a bridge is an example of like a multi-chain application, right? It works between two different chains. When we say omni-chain, we kind of mean applications and apps that work across multiple chains simultaneously. Um, Typically, with multi-chain apps, the developer might be deploying the same application to multiple chains or a similar application. It's almost like they're copy pasting from one place to the next. It's just a series of connected applications, whereas an omni-chain application is designed from the ground up to work across multiple chains. So you can kind of deploy your application logic in one place and interact with assets across multiple chains. That's kind of at a very high level the idea for omni-chain apps.
Perfect. Appreciate that. So what makes ZetaChain different from all the other layer one blockchains that are out there today?
Yep. So we are built, like I said, from the ground up to kind of support omni-chain contracts, so making things easier in a multi-chain world. We're taking this really decentralized and trustless approach to operate across multiple chains. We've seen other folks entering this, multi-chain, omni-chain space with message passing and things like that, but they're often relying on trusted verifiers and other centralized parties. We're trying to make ours, we are building ours as decentralized as possible. And other blockchains, especially layer ones, they don't really want you to leave, right? They want you inside their limited ecosystem. They want developers building on them and them alone. We're actually encouraging people to build on us in order to operate outside of us, right? We want you to connect to other chains. We want to give developers and users a better experience when they're operating in this multi-chain world.
Got it. So let's dive a little bit into the tech side of it. So can you walk us through like how does your omni-chain approach eliminate the need for things like wrapped assets, bridges, streamlining cross-chain assets, data transfers?
Yep. So we are taking, for a lot of that we've outlined, right? What we've had so far is kind of what people have built and hacked together based on the limited infrastructure they've had. Since we are built from like I said, from the ground up to support this, we're not bolting on this functionality after the fact. So we've gone through and abstracted some of the complication of this away to make it easier for users and easier for developers who don't have to worry about wrapping assets and bridging and that kind of work. And so the novel thing we've done is what we call our ZRC20 token, which is kind of an abstraction of a token or native asset on an external chain. And it allows a developer to interact with that like it would be any ERC20 token. So if you imagine building let's say a simple swap application that's swapping, let's say wrapped Bitcoin for wrapped ETH, right? You could build that on Ethereum, right, on one EVM blockchain. With us, you would interact with native Ethereum and native Bitcoin, and you would do that just like they were ERC20 tokens, but our protocol is actually handling that native asset externally for you. So it makes it a lot simpler for developers to build these things. So there are still cross-chain assets and movement involved, but the protocol manages a lot of that in a more secure, simplified manner.
I think for me, like one of the more exciting things about this approach is really like you're solving the issue of like fragmented liquidity across the different layer ones. Can you kind of walk us through like how like from a technical perspective, I get it, but can you like for the broader audience like talk about from like a user experience, what does that actually mean when you're solving that issue of fragmented liquidity across the layer ones?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it helps to dive in quickly into how it's currently set up, where the reason it's so fragmented is we have these different pools on different chains. So you might have, let's use like USDC just as an easy example, right? You might have a USDC and ETH pool over on Ethereum. You have USDC and BSC over on the BSC chain, and you have to balance all of these pools individually. With the ZRC20, instead of having to balance individual pools, is you can just take native USDC on Ethereum, native USDC on BSC, and balance those two against each other, where any balancing is done by kind of balancing them across chains instead of doing it multiple times on each individual chain.
Got it. Thanks for that. So kind of transitioning to more on the consensus layer, can you explain the advantages of, say, transitioning from like a proof of authority consensus to proof of stake model?
Mm-hmm.
From example, if you can touch on, security, scalability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for anyone who's really familiar with it, right, I think proof of authority is great for getting things started, but it's not a long-term strategy, right? The whole model here is trying to move away from trusted individuals because they might be trusted one day, but they might not be trusted tomorrow, and making it a more decentralized model that anyone can kind of get into. And so that's really the advantage of that shift from proof of authority. It's great for speed of development, getting stuff started, but moving to proof of stake increases security by removing those trusted parties and using the economic incentives of a proof of stake model like we've seen in Ethereum moving to proof of stake and most Cosmos chains and things like that.
Got it. Now, touching on like the developer experience. Now, sometimes what I see in the ecosystem is sometimes projects with great technology fail to gain traction because they're not necessarily attracting developers. So can you walk us through how easy it is for a developer to implement, the omnichain functionality into their existing smart contracts to create these, omni dApps?
Mm-hmm. We kind of have two approaches there. And I think before diving into how they would do it, there's why would they do it, right? If you have an application, it's running, why would you bother coming in and looking at making it omni-chain? And really, I think any application you were thinking about making multi-chain could be omni-chain. And by deploying and interacting with the main logic in one location, it makes the operations much easier. You're managing one application instead of managing 5 applications, right? And it also allows you to kind of streamline the user experience a little bit. The user may not need to jump between 4 or 5 different chains in order to do something. So that's really why they would move on board. And you're right about one of the challenges is attracting developers. It's not enough to just build a great blockchain. You need to build a great ecosystem and onboard people and build a good developer experience. And so we have a lot of tutorials and examples out at zetachain.com/docs, starting from simple hello world, here's how to deploy your first contract, to how to set up a omni-chain curve pool that natively manages assets across multiple chains. And those ones are great for getting started and kind of seeing how to do it natively. If you're building a new application, it's a great place to start. If you have your existing application and you want to make it omni-chain, there's a couple different approaches for you. The best one is taking this really built-in omni-chain functionality, which the tutorials and things will go through. But we also support message passing, which can be an option for some folks as well. If they want to do minimal changes to their application, they can sort of pass messages across chains using us.
That's great. Now, we mentioned, one of the benefits of this new architecture really is the solving the issue of liquidity. But are there any other benefits that want to talk about as ZetaChain's one-way peg mechanism, say for moving Zeta tokens across chains compared to traditional two-way pegging?
Mm-hmm. It makes it much, much simpler, like you said. And because of that, the security is improved. It's easier to monitor. There's faster delivery times. And that mechanism is really abstracted away from the user and at a certain level developers as well. They don't really have to think about the one-way peg or think about converting these things over. Because using the ZRC20 abstraction, they can manage those assets natively without having to worry about that conversion process. So as a blockchain, using the one-way peg makes it much simpler and more secure and easier to monitor, which obviously results in a better experience for users. Um, and I don't, and it for the developers, they don't have to worry about that. It's all abstracted away.
Now, like moving on to more of like the user experience, can you just give an example of some of the applications that you foresee that can be built with ZetaChain?
Mm-hmm. Anything you think you can build on another chain, you can build on ZetaChain, and we believe we can do it a little bit better, right? Which is a little big thing to say, but we really do. They're the kind of typical DeFi solutions, right? So we're talking about lending and yield protocols, cross-chain dexes. We have a partner who will be launching a cross-chain dex with us shortly after we launch. Um, those are really obvious ones because you're managing assets across different chains. And other kind of generic primitives, payment systems, any kind of social or games would be a really effective application on ZetaChain as well, especially if you wanted to take or receive payment in assets on external chains or be able to move um, NFTs or data across multiple chains. Any, yeah, any basically any to any payment system. So if you're building an application that's going to be doing any kind of payroll, you're paying members or contributors, they can get a lot of flexibility on how they get paid. Cross-chain NFTs, and then there's a lot of ideas that we just haven't really thought of yet. We're focused on building this blockchain. The developers are out there. Those of you who are listening on this call, right? Many of you are going to be much smarter than I am with much better ideas. So we want to know your ideas. We have a grant program that we've recently launched, and we're looking to get more groups into that.
That's great. Now I want to kind of turn the corner and touch on one of my favorite topics, and I'm sure yours, security. You mentioned that this approach is inherently more secure. Can you walk us through what are some of the key security measures employed by ZetaChain to protect against potential threats, ensure the safety of users' assets and data, and just overall what what do you want to talk about as far as why is this approach more secure than the traditional approach?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there. Um, as far as how ZetaChain itself is functioning, as we mentioned, there's that one-way peg where the only thing moving through the system is Zeta. Makes that much easier to monitor, much easier to lock down. And we have caps so that should anything happen, blast radius is always limited, but by simplifying the interface, it makes it much easier to lock down and secure. That's for sort of our internal piece. Externally, the way this functions is we have these observer signer nodes that are out there. They're watching what's happening on these external chains, and when a authorized action takes place, they see it. They reach consensus that Dave did in fact send ETH that he wants to transfer across chain to let's say Polygon, and then once they all reach consensus on that, they all sign an agreement using a TSS distributed key, where essentially all of our observer signers are sharing a private key that has been broken up into multiple sections. No individual party can recreate that key, but it allows them to operate on external chains with an externally owned address, just like they would if it was a single wallet, which gives a lot of flexibility in how they interact. But that relying on that TSS model is where a lot of that security comes from, as well as having there's multiple groups who are observing these events and reaching consensus versus having one trusted party or one trusted verifier. That's sort of the protocol level piece. The other part that I think is good to touch on just is the development process as well. This is something I think is overlooked a little in Web3, where we talk a lot about just you get an audit and then you're good to go, right? And that's the end of it. But that's not true, right? So we have audits that we're obviously working with you guys on and some other parties, but there's also making sure our developers, not only do we hire great developers, but keep up with security training and understand how to write this code and make it secure. Extra safety measures, like I mentioned, like kind of token caps, and then responses, where we're doing a lot of emergency response planning as a team. We know how to react to things when stuff happen on mainnet. and generally being prepared, not only to be incredibly secure at launch, but to be secure every day after that. Every software update, how do we make sure those are always secure as well?
So I love I just something that you just mentioned that I love that you mentioned and I want to touch on it because if anyone who has gone to any one of my keynotes or heard me on a panel, I've kind of morphed into this angry old man that kind of shakes my fist at the audience talking about the role of an auditor. The role of an auditor isn't supposed to be this let me outsource my entire security function and get that stamp of approval. The role of an auditor is really, like you said, just like one of the many things that an organization must do as part of the security stack. So I kind of want to touch on like what is your vision or what do you where do you see the role of an auditor like Halborn? And why did you guys, specifically decide to, not necessarily pick us, but like what are the qualifications that you typically look for?
Yes, it's a very good point. And the reason for an auditor, right? There's two parts. There's an auditor should not be, like you said, should not be your security solution, right? Just because you get an audit does not mean you're going to be secure. Um, it's an extra set of eyes. It's an extra set of very experienced eyes, right? You want people who have worked on similar projects, who have been in the space for a while, and who really are knowing what they're looking for. Because chances are, if your head's down working on something for 6 months, something new's probably happened you've missed, right? And so having auditors who are really experienced and staying up to date is important for that. But it's a two-way street where they should understand your project and their findings should inform the team so the team can continue to make better, write better code instead of just writing code and getting it audited and continuing that cycle. But why we kind of, you pick someone, like I said, based on their experience and what you think they can bring to your team and how they can help out.
So like walk us through like what has been the experience of working with Halborn? Has it been collaborative? Like is it, you're shipping the code off and we hand it back to you? Like how have you been finding that the process and the collaborativeness of the partnership?
Yeah, it's been good so far. Very collaborative, and we're actually using you guys for a couple of different services where you're leveraging your sort of security advisory service. So we have ongoing. We've done initial code audit of the protocol. We've also gone into some pen tests of our web applications, bounced ideas off of you for just different directions the project could go in, saying, hey, have you seen this? Anyone take this approach before? Hey, we're thinking about doing X, Y, and Z. Do you guys have any feedback? So it's been nice to have a partner in that to kind of bounce things back and forth off of.
That's great. All right, so let's touch on the mainnet. So when is the launch scheduled? And what measures are you taking outside of securing it, taken to ensure a smooth launch?
Mm-hmm. So trying to ensure a smooth mainnet launch, right? That's always tricky. We've seen a lot of projects who launch in the first week, they're offline a lot of the time. And because we're trying to ensure a smooth launch, I do not have a specific date for you, right? We're launching mainnet here in the next few months, but in order to ensure a smooth mainnet, we are doing a lot of internal testing. We're launching an incentivized testnet that will be up in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to be running that, up till and past mainnet, where we're actually going to be doing a lot of testing on it. We have a bug bounty program that's out there right now, so users can, or individuals, users, hackers can go out there and try and poke holes in our network, try and find bugs, both in the security or the smart contracts, but also in the protocol code and just the functionality, and get rewarded for it before we launch in mainnet. And we've going through multiple rounds of audits, as we mentioned before, but we're also continuing those conversations, getting audits every time we do updates, and refining our emergency response plans for mainnet, right? If we do start having problems, who's going to wake up at 3 a.m. and help out with this, right? Getting all those things put in place.
Exactly. All right. So let's talk about roadmap. With the backing of, you have some great industry leaders, definitely some, experienced advisors that, I personally admire. What can we expect from you guys in terms of future partnerships, collaborations, developments, anything else you want to mention on the roadmap?
Yes, our roadmap is going to be quite full. We've got a lot of ecosystem partnerships coming up. So just a few examples, right? We've got RPC providers like Anchor and BlockPi, who are coming online to help support developers. We've got some others who will be announced soon. We've been partnering with some of the biggest validators in the world, and other entities just to host the incentivized testnet, and then also be prepared when we do mainnet as well. A variety of market makers. We've got a lot of security vendors. We got Halborn, obviously. We have a few others in the space who are both helping us on the protocol side, but we also have some stuff on just how to protect the community, right? There's a lot of phishing scams out there, and we're working with groups to kind of moderate Discord better. How do we crowdsource scams and protect the community? Those sorts of things. We're trying to scale the developer ecosystem, so we've launched a $5 million grant program. We started announcing some launch partners last week. I think even as we speak right now, there's a Omnichain NFT minting interface called OmniC that they just integrated with our testnet. And so they're trying out cross-chain NFTs on testnet. Users can go and try that out today. We've got some others here, such as DAO Starter, which went live for Omnichain fundraising platform. They're also integrated with our testnet right now. And the idea being users can deposit any token from any chain into this fundraising platform to help support the projects they believe in. And then at a kind of a more strategic level, we're working with some established partners. So we've got a tier one crypto exchange who are building a Omnichain DEX. We've got some Omnichain domain naming systems, kind of like ENS, but across multiple chains. And then some cross-chain lending platforms as well.
That's great. So there's a lot of information. So for the community, what's the best place for them to stay up to date on everything that you guys are doing?
Yes, yeah, that was definitely a lot of words coming out there. So the best option is you can, here on Twitter, follow us on Twitter. We are Zeta Blockchain, so you can follow us there for latest news. You can go to our website, ZetaChain.com. We have a few links out there, both the doc, our doc site for developers who want to build or anyone just wants to learn more about the chain. And then we have some blog posts as well on ZetaChain.com about our, different initiatives and different projects. And the last one would be our Discord server as well. We have a community of about 600,000 people in there right now. So there's always something going on, always something to learn. And we post a lot of information out there as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you for taking the time to spend with us and the community that's listening. And, for everyone listening, definitely check them out. Definitely one of the projects that I'm personally looking at. And tune in next week for another edition of Halborn Office Hours. Thanks, Charlie.
All right, thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Take care.